Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Grand Rounds. My name's Tom Fowden, I'm the chair of Grand Rounds today. Perth, they know about it and the bridge is up, but they don't appear to have dialed in yet, so they may appear suddenly out of the ether in a minute. Today is the last Grand Round of the academic year, so thank you very much, all of you, for turning up. It seems the caterers thought last week was the last week of Grand Rounds, hence the lack of food, so I apologise for that. But I see you've all been able to source some food of your own. I am very pleased that we've got the GMC coming to visit today. As I said in my email this morning, it's through my career I've hoped never to really hear from the GMC, because whenever a letter plops down on your mat to the letterbox, you've always got that fear that it's a complaint and you're about to be investigated. But it's not. The GMC doesn't just investigate naughty doctors like me, and we've got Nicola Cotter here who's going to speak to us about what the GMC can do to help us in leadership and management roles. But before we start that, the usual parish notices. The University of Dundee's pioneering work with the teal embalming method means that those who bequeath their remains for research and education will soon be helping to teach doctors potentially life-saving surgical interventions and validate the testing of new medical devices. A grant from the Dr. Horden Trust worth more than £300,000 will enable staff from the university's Centre of Anatomy and Human Identification to develop a programme for training senior medics. Heart, stroke, kidney and liver patients are among those who will benefit from the training clinicians will undergo and the devices being tested on the teal embalmed cadavers. I had a patient this week who'd left his body to Carhead. It was remarkably straightforward. We were expecting a whole lot of paperwork, but it was just a single sheet of A4 that the patient had signed beforehand, and it was one phone call, and the patient was transferred over to Carhead once he'd died. So I'm getting one of those forms just in case I die. Here's some more research that's been carried out in Dundee. As unlikely as it may seem, women who have their appendix or tonsils removed when they are young are more likely to get pregnant, and to do so sooner than the rest of the population, a new study from the University of Dundee has shown. The study examined the anonymised medical records of hundreds of thousands of women in the United Kingdom, revealing that pregnancy rates were significantly higher amongst those who had undergone appendicectomy, tonsillectomy, or both. It doesn't say whether that's at the same time. The research does not mean that removing a normal appendix directly increases fertility. It does, however, mean that young women who need to have their appendix removed can do so without fear of risk of future fertility. The Duncan O'Jordan College of Art and Design will host its preview night for their upcoming exhibition of master's work from students in MSc Animation, VFX, MFA, Art and Humanities, and various other forensic art and facial identification art programs. The event is held on the 19th of August and is free to attend. If you walk through the radiology department, you'll see there's a lot of artwork on the wall which has been taken from the Masters show in previous years and is put up for display in the hospital. This week at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, staff and students of the university will explore what happens when you shuffle off this mortal coil. The previously unseen Death pantomime by the School of English's Eddie Small will feature staff and students from across the university aiming to raise awareness of the cultural changes in traditions of death over the last 80 years through dark comedy and song. The show begins at 7:45 on Saturday. Tickets are available at ticketsource.co.uk. And on that cheery note, I'm pleased to introduce Nicola Cotter from the GMC, who's going to tell us about leadership and management. She's given you some props. I think there are bits of paper and free pens. She tells me she's going to wander about a bit and possibly interrogate you a little bit, but in a friendly manner. So whilst she comes up, I'll just change the technology over. Nicola Cotter, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, I'll start up here, and as Tom said, I'm here from General Medical Council, and one of the things I noticed from the presentation that Tom just put up was the strapline for the GMC of regulating doctors and ensuring good medical practice. Well, a few years ago now we changed our strapline to working with doctors, working for patients, and I think my role that's just really been ongoing for about a year now in the GMC is actually testament to that we're really trying to get out and do a lot more work with the profession that we regulate so that we can become a bit more of a supportive arm. So I'm going to take you through some slides if this works. I've maybe picked up the wrong. Yep. So how many of you knew that we had a GMC in Scotland, that there's an office in Scotland? A smattering, but very, very small number of people. And that's, again, testament to the fact that we're not very well known. Nobody really wants to hear from us. Yes, you know, you pay your fees. You'll do that probably through either Manchester or London. But actually, we've had a team in Scotland for 12 years now. This is our team. Victoria Carson is our head of Scottish Affairs. And they brought my position into post just about a year ago. And before that, the GMC's role in Scotland was really around being the kind of, I suppose, conduit between the profession in Scotland, the health service in Scotland, how the government, how the devolved powers work, and actually feeding that back in to the wider GMC, because we are a UK regulator. But we need to make sure that all the devolved countries are represented by the GMC as a whole. And through time, and we'll not say we've got it 100% right yet, but part of my role is to be here to listen to the profession and find out what it is that you feel you could actually would be helpful for you to get from the GMC. So we will at the end, if we've got time, get a chance for you to ask any kind of ad hoc questions that are not about leadership management necessarily. As Tom said, I will be asking you to participate and talk to me throughout the session. But yeah, we'll start off with just the kind of basics of who the GMC are. So I'm sure you're all well aware that we hold the register for doctors, and that's currently, there's a consultation ongoing at the moment. So if anybody's interested in looking at that, you can find out details from our website about the register that we hold and the information that we hold about doctors. We're obviously involved in education and setting standards and promoting those standards. We're involved in revalidation. Every 5 years you'll all be well versed in revalidation. We need to ensure that the doctors that are on the register remain fit to be on the register, and really that's what we do, working with the responsible officers, usually the medical directors, to ensure that doctors are going through that kind of continual learning process. And then fitness to practice is the one that we're probably most well known for. Again, really trying to ensure that the GMC is seen as an organisation other than just there to take your money and strike you off. So standards in the middle is really what kind of holds that jigsaw together, and professional standards that the GMC set. I'm sure you're all well versed with good medical practice, and one of the other pieces of guidance I've just given you is around leadership and management, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. But my role was really brought in specifically to look at the guidance that the GMC set. And actually, you're all very busy people, very busy profession. It's very difficult sometimes to get a chance to come out of practice and sit down and talk about some of the key ethical, sometimes legal challenges that you're faced with on a day-to-day basis. So my role is to run a service called Promoting Professionalism for the GMC, and it's to really run sessions like this as a bit of a taster, because this is really an hour of, first of all, let's just touch the surface with leadership and management. But the other sessions that we offer kind of cover sort of half-day workshops where we really get into the nitty-gritty of really talking about real ethical challenges that you're faced with, that you can talk to your peers about and maybe have some debate and discussion around, and actually have someone there from the GMC to say, well, this is what the guidance says, this is how it can help you within your role. So really that's what I've been doing for the last year, going across Scotland, promoting our standards. As I say, the ones at the top you're probably quite well versed with. The ones along the bottom you might not be quite so familiar with. They're what we call our explanatory guidance, and they tend to be a bit more focused information on some maybe technical or difficult topics that quite often come from questions that doctors have actually posed to the GMC. You're probably not aware that we do have that opportunity. We have a standards team, a kind of ethical team who can answer your questions. So if you have got any tricky situations and you're not sure what to do about, you can actually come to the GMC for some, to ask for some advice or questions based on our guidance. So these explanatory guidance along the bottom are ones that have been developed as a result of a lot of the, I suppose, information that comes to the GMC as a whole as to what doctors are looking for. So, as I said, we're going to touch on leadership and management. And I suppose the first thing to say is that, this title is Leadership and Management for All Doctors. This isn't a session for managers, for senior consultants, clinicians necessarily. It's actually for all doctors, for trainees, everybody that actually has the responsibility that the GMC guidance covers. You will notice, those of you that have got a copy, there are some parts of the guidance that say this is what the GMC guidance says, and then it'll say with doctors with extra responsibilities also have to do this, that and the next thing. And that's really where that comes into play if you've got a clinical governance role or a management role. But leadership is actually something that's expected of all doctors, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. We'll touch on team working with others and how you support others in your team, about the importance of reflection and improving standards based on reflective practice, and do a little bit around leadership models, leadership styles, and actually get you to do a wee bit of reflection yourself on what makes a good leader. But we won't labour that point, because I know these are types of courses that you'll have done in your training. I think my background has actually been in, before I've had 10 years in the voluntary sector, but prior to that was in leadership training within the finance sector, the private sector. And actually, I think this quote is really pertinent, because what happens is people that you find that are put into leadership kind of moulds, or who are actually asked to be leaders, sometimes can find it quite uncomfortable. It's not necessarily something that comes naturally. And what you tend to find is the ones that are natural leaders are the ones that tend to then go on to become the real force of change and support within a team. And this was just a quote from Richard Bomber, who was doing some work with the King's Fund. And I think it's really pertinent, because it's really about thinking about yourself as a leader. Sometimes when we've done this session with junior doctors, some of them have said, but actually, is this not for when I become a consultant? But actually, not everyone can actually influence as a leader from whatever level. And we've had leaders in business and organisations. Leadership is important across the whole field and range of occupations. We tend to think of leaders as in the army and in the police, and the importance of that strong leadership. But as we're all well aware, there are issues within the NHS, there are things that happen that really cause, an issue around patient safety. And the importance, one of the key things that we say within leadership management, is the importance of everyone taking that responsibility and not just thinking, well, I'm not their line manager, it's not for me to do anything about this. But this is actually about, if there are things happening that you're seeing, that people are needing mentored, supported, that you actually have a role to play within that. So this is our guidance, and I'm going to just stop for a couple of minutes and get you, those of you, hopefully most of you should have sight of a piece of guidance, but if not, I've got it up on a slide anyway. But on page 7, it talks about what the duties of doctors within leadership and management. And there are kind of 7, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sort of bullet points there. And what I want you to do is I just want you to just pause for a minute, consider these bullets either from the guidance or from the slide, and just talk to the person next to you about which one or two of these pieces of guidance you think are the most difficult, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about what you've said and why. We're not going to have a chance to go around everybody, but if you just spend a couple of minutes just having a chat with the person next to you, and then I'll ask anybody who's brave enough to speak to me to tell me what one you picked and why. Okay, so just a minute or two on that. All right. Okay, anybody like to be the first to share their thoughts on what one of these is difficult and why?
Don't be afraid. A brave man.
Thank you.
I'll kick it off. Consultant radiologist. I think C is the most difficult.
Okay.
And that's really based on experience on two separate occasions and two separate places. Where if you do that, you find that a lot of people do support you, but support you below the parapet.
Okay.
And you are left on your own. And that is intensely difficult and very stressful.
Yep.
And I think that stops a lot of people raising sensible concerns that might not need a lot of resource to fix. But it's because of that, they see what happens to people who put their head above the parapet, and although the support is there, it's not said.
Yep. Okay, thanks for sharing that, and a really, really important point, and one of the reasons why one of our sessions that we do, and I'm doing a session here in Nine Wells in September, a longer workshop that's open to new consultants and new GPs around raising and acting concerns and leadership and management, because it is one of the key areas. There's also somebody from Dundee has contacted me to say that she wants to come along to that session to talk about what are the internal processes for if you do want to raise an acting concern, what support's available for you. There are many areas of support that the GMC can offer, and others we have a confidential helpline that's there to support people. Yeah.
The second time I did actually go to the GMC.
Okay.
And they were actually very helpful, I have to say.
Yeah.
Clarifying process.
Yep.
So if anybody has something important like that, it's worth finding out maybe from the defence organisation.
Yeah.
And the GMC. Just clarify where would you go about it.
Yeah, we have a full kind of flow chart and a decision-making toolkit on our website as well that kind of guides you through the steps that you should take when you've got a concern about something. But I think the important thing there in all of these points on this slide is the sort of word at the top of the title there which says doctors must. And within the GMC guidance we have something called shoulds and musts. And the musts are really things that we say as an organisation that either there's a legal duty or there's a really strong ethical reason why you should be adhering to this piece of guidance. And in actual fact, these things are so important. I mean, we're all, don't need to be reminded of things that have happened in other parts of the world and not too far away from us in Scotland as well, where people haven't been challenged or things haven't been raised. And very much around, and we'll touch on culture in a bit, because I think it's really important to consider that culture that we're working in, because actually, if we have an open culture where we're looking to actively learn from things that go wrong, and that we encourage discussion and debrief and all of that, looking at our datexes in a kind of non-threatening manner, then it can actually be really conducive to helping to change that culture. But absolutely, it comes up every time, so thanks for bringing that up. Anything else? Anybody else? Yep.
Yeah, I am head of the undergraduate course here, and
Okay.
That was similarly the one that we thought was the most difficult. I just wanted to raise the issue of how that impacts on students.
Yeah.
We have in recent years had some quite painful experiences with students raising concerns and the response not being open and constructive. So whatever the rights and wrongs of the concerns raised by particular students on particular occasions, they were left intensely bruised by the experience, as Sam was alluding to, and reinforcing a negative culture. Yeah. So I do think there is a lot of work to be done on that, and indeed we are seeking to do so with the undergraduates, but it pervades all levels. We teach them one thing, but it's not what they witness in practice. They get very mixed messages.
Absolutely, and I'm seeing that across the whole of Scotland. It's not just something that's an issue here, obviously within Tayside. It is one of the most kind of delivered sessions that I'm doing, is looking at either leadership management, raising concerns, looking at how we can act as a profession, change that culture. Because you can bet your bottom dollar everybody in this room comes to work wanting to do a good job, and on the same front everybody will make mistakes. Now we have to have that culture whereby we recognise that happens, and that we can learn from that and actually make it a more positive and open and transparent experience. So we could probably talk about raising concerns all day, but let's move on from that. Did anybody think about any of the other ones? Somebody behind you, Tom.
It's slightly difficult because I'm not entirely sure what it's asking of us, it says doctors must demonstrate effective team working and leadership. I'm not sure what that means and what we need to do to demonstrate that we're working effectively in teams and leading.
That's a good one to pick, because we're going to touch on a case study in a minute, which actually shows the responsibilities that everyone has within a team. And essentially, it's around showing that you are an individual and that you're taking responsibility for things that you see, and that you're supporting team members who are going through difficulties, or you're supporting the team if there is an issue that's going on. But we'll touch a bit more on that in a minute. And I think, demonstrating leadership is very, it's quite hard to sort of think about what is that kind of tangible thing that we're doing that demonstrates it, because management's different, because as a manager you will have tasks to do. Leaders is very much about your person. It's about the way that you work, your ethos, your values. So it is, I totally appreciate that it's difficult. And one of the things obviously within your revalidation you're asked to kind of reflect on is actually your kind of team working and how you support others. And that's really what we're looking for, is that you do actually do some reflection and think, what kind of leader am I? And what am I actually? Because it takes all sorts as well. You will have all sorts of people within your teams with different skills, and it's about tapping into them. Okay, we'll take one more. At the back there.
Can I just ask how doctors must teach and train if they don't have time in their job plan to do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems a contradiction and creates an unnecessary tension within that document.
I think again, this is around, one of the things that we say at the GMC around the guidance is that, if there are things, and there's no doubt, I'm surprised nobody picked up on the last one, using resources effectively, that always comes up where people say, how on earth can we, in the constraints of the budgets we're in, etc., etc., and it's the same with, actually the teaching time when you actually get the chance to do it. And again, it's about us trying to shift that culture and trying to ensure that we are raising these things with our managers and saying, actually, to meet the GMC guidance on leadership management, I have to do this. This is part of my role. And actually, I'm not being allowed that time, or I don't have the time to do that. And I think the other thing is to consider the little ways, but just by kind of mentoring and by showing through, I've got a slide on, behaviour breeds behaviour, and it's around actually letting people see you as role models, and you'll be amazed at what they learn actually from just watching and seeing you practice. But there's no doubt that resource, time, all of these things are real key challenges for doctors. Yep.
So if you say that to your managers, and they're back and say, well, what the GMC going to do about it? Or if you don't do that, you don't like them, because you don't really have a power to do anything about that organisation, do you?
The thing that we would say around this is, obviously we're looking for things that are going to specifically impact on patient safety. People that are referred to the GMC are not referred because they've missed one must within the GMC guidance. That's absolutely not the case. But what we have the guidance for is actually for us to be able to look at the bigger picture and say that, what we expect of really good doctors is that they are following the musts in this guidance. There are some musts that are in the guidance that are actually legally, you've got a legal duty to follow. But in actual fact, you're absolutely right. This is about a bigger picture. It's about a culture. It's about encouraging your kind of management team to allow you to have the ability to be what would be classed as a really good doctor.
You've got an ability against an individual you've given their performance approach regulate that, but you don't prevent it.
We're not the service, we're not the service regulator. So you've got Healthcare Improvement Scotland, who are there to look at systems, if you like, to look at actually how is it working within areas. And that's obviously, again, you'll be aware of high-level reviews that they go in and do reviews against different hospital sites, looking at all of these things. The other thing to say is that we do pick up through our national training survey as well information around what trainees are thinking about with regard to their training and their mentoring, their support, and we do have the function to be able to take trainees out where we feel they're not being adequately supported and there's a patient safety issue. Asha?
Just saying, in response to that management thing, it's going to be a number of doctors in that tier of management who are very responsible to that.
Yeah.
They
Yep. And each individual is, and that's what we try to say, is that this is not about, you know, us trying to set a rule book. This isn't a rule book. This is a guide for actually how to be a good doctor, and it's a guide that is used by the GMC, obviously, when people are referred to us. And if people, you know, what we say is if there's persistent misuse of the guidance, you know, significant and persistent misuse is really what we're looking at. You know, somebody does, you know, one thing, that's not going to get referred to GMC, but as you said, that this is actually everyone's responsibility, so all doctors at all levels. Right, I must move on just because conscious of time, but I think it's important to do that session at the start of any of our guidance sessions, because, you know, you don't really get a chance to look at what are the ins and outs and what are the significant things in this guidance. And if it does help you to be able to go back to your seniors and the managers to say, look, this is what it's saying here, you know, I really want to be able to meet this guidance, then, you know, hopefully that can be helpful for you. So we're going to just talk a wee bit about teamwork and that whole kind of area around, you know, what the leader's role is within a team. And, you know, it says there about the formal leader of the team being accountable for the performance sometimes, but the responsibility for identifying problems within a team, for solving them, taking appropriate action, is actually something that is shared, or should be shared by the whole team. And that's kind of as referenced in the guidance as well. So teamwork is so important, and throughout good medical practice as well, there is a domain that looks specifically at teamwork and communication within your team. And, you know, respect for all members of the team is an area that sometimes we get, you know, people coming to us and saying that there are issues of, you know, undermining, or there's not, that respect is lost, and that can be really, really difficult. It has such a huge impact on the effective running of a team if respect is lost, and if there's anybody within the team that feels that they're being undermined. Discrimination, it's interesting because we've had debates recently around this next kind of case study I'm going to highlight to you, and you know, I think, you know, again throughout the GMC guidance it talks about every doctor has a responsibility to challenge discrimination. You know, that slide earlier about, you know, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, I mean, that is absolutely true. So it is important that, you know, when you're seeing things happening, if you're seeing any discrimination, that it's not okay, you know, just to walk past, that you do, you know, have a role to do something about it. So I'm just going to share with you this story. I'll not read it all out, I'll just put it up and let you read it. Okay, so normally we would do this as an interactive case study, but I'm just conscious of time, and there's another sort of interactive session I want to spend a bit more time on. So I'll just show you my follow-up slides here and let you know what the kind of guidance would say about your role in this kind of situation. So what we say is you must keep up to date with and work within the law or guidance and other regulations relevant to your work. You must treat colleagues fairly and with respect. You must not bully or harass colleagues or unfairly discriminate against them. And you must not unfairly discriminate against patients or colleagues by allowing your personal views to affect your professional relationships or the treatment you provide or arrange. And I think, you know, it's absolutely paramount that we, you know, do take this part of the guidance really seriously, because we are working in a multicultural society with lots of different, you know, doctors, patients we're facing with every day. That it's important that we actually have an equal and fair service for all. What the guidance says is that, and this is going back to your thing about how do you demonstrate that you're actually, you know, working with colleagues and leadership. You must tackle discrimination where it arises and encourage your colleagues to do the same. You should challenge colleagues if their behaviour doesn't comply with this guidance and follow the guidance we give on reporting concerns if the behaviour amounts to abuse or denial of a patient or colleague's rights. So in the case study for that, if we'd kind of gone through it, what we would be getting you to think about is, if you were that doctor, and whether you were a trainee stage or a consultant, and you heard somebody making either a racist, homophobic comment, how sure are you that you would actually personally take that as your responsibility to tackle? There'll be many of you feeling probably quite uncomfortable about that, because it's actually not that easy a thing to do. To have those conversations. There's so much to consider around having those conversations, the impact on the rest of the team, how actually the person will take it, is it going to cause actually more friction? So you have to think very, very carefully, and you have to know and be able to read your situation to decide actually how you deal with that. But the really, I suppose, bottom line is you have to deal with it. You can't be heard, and especially if you're a more senior in your team and you hear that even in the staff room, don't know if they have still staff rooms these days, but in the staff room or in the corridor, and you're hearing, people making these sorts of comments, and if you don't challenge it, and you've got a trainee with you or a student, how is that going to come across? How concerned are they going to be about when they come to work in this site or hospital? So really important that we do tackle that. And it says, you must actively advance equality and diversity by creating a positive working environment free from. So again, that importance of that culture, of that environment, and, working in an area with very, very stressful situations, very long hours. There's no doubt there's going to be situations where things are going to come out and people are going to say things that perhaps they've not thought about. So important that we nip that in the bud and ensure that we get a chance to kind of challenge it if need be. Does anybody have a major problem or point they want to make about that? Asha?
You might have touched on it, you mentioned the staff room.
Yeah.
If said on the works night out,
Mm.
what would the guidance say about it? Responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, you still have responsibilities. The GMC are concerned about obviously not just the patient safety, but also the reputation of the profession. And a lot of it comes back to some of the social media issues that we get from doctors, where they say, actually put that on social media. But I mean, I didn't say it. I didn't actually say that make that racist comment or say that. I actually just, maybe liked a picture or typed something. So it's really important that as a doctor you're aware of your responsibilities for upholding the values of the profession and making some sort of comment within, especially if you're with others within your team. It's because actually that's going to go back to the workplace, and people are going to be, remember that doctor that said that he doesn't really like working with gay people or black people or whatever. So it's really important that you uphold that value of the profession even when you're out with work. Doesn't mean to say you have to not have a life, as many of the junior doctors will say when you start talking about social media. It's not about that, but it's actually just about ensuring that you're upholding the kind of trust in the profession that is out there. So this slide is about thinking about actually what makes a good team, what makes a team bad, and actually what's a really ugly, really area where there's actually just not any way out of, because actually there are lots of, unfortunately, incidents of where things have got really ugly, and we've had to have either regulators or other organisations in to try and get to the bottom of cases. So all I'm going to do with this is just get you to consider your team. Is it a good team? Is it a team where people are listened to, are valued, are respected? Is it a team that actually people feel they can come up with ideas and suggestions and questions? Is it a bad team? And by a bad team, that doesn't necessarily mean to say there's a lot of bad people in it or badness. It's actually about, are we actually not that functional? Have we not got processes in place that actually will allow people to work in a team together? So it's maybe more of a functional issue rather than the ugly, which is around really where there's a lot of bullying and undermining going on. So really important for you to consider that, and sometimes just ask others in your team, where do you think we're at, and what do you think we need to do to move towards being a good team? And I think, there's no doubt that, we're talking here about leadership, and we've got two kind of versions of different leaders here. Anybody recognise our wee Lego men? Yep. So we've got Darth Vader, and we've got Gandalf the Grey. So very different types of leaders. We have inspiring leaders that we're aware of, and that we know of, and that we look up to and aspire to. And I think one of these, you can read about any inspiring leaders and take so much from what they write and what they say. And I think this is really pertinent. We use this within our sessions for doctors, because sometimes things do seem impossible, and we get lots of doctors saying to us, but I don't have the time, I don't have the resource or the support to do this. And again, it goes back to that culture that we really need to just take those small steps, because if we all say we can't, then we're actually never going to get there. It will be impossible. So really important to think about. Now this, I just realised, is quite small, so I'm going to get you just to spend a couple of minutes. Hopefully you can read those slides, but I'll read them out to you. And again, just spend a minute or two just reflecting on any one of these questions, because many of you will have done leadership courses, you'll have done it when you were at university, you'll have probably done it within management courses. So I'm not concerned about whether you go through each of these questions, but just want you to take one that shouts out to you and just again share. We'll just get a couple of you to share your answers on. So you could either tell us, share who your leadership role models and why. Why do they stand out for you? What is it? It doesn't need to be anybody like Nelson Mandela. It can be, your first ever clinical supervisor, whoever that may be, and just tell us why. Or you might want to talk about, why is leadership important as a doctor? What is it about leadership that you feel specifically for doctors is important? The sort of two in the middle, two at the end there, what leadership skills do you have and what do you need to develop, is we tend to give this out as a worksheet in our workshops and just get you to jot things down and take it away for your own kind of, obviously, reflection and personal development. So we'll not really talk about them at all, but interested if anybody wants to give any thoughts on the last one. How do leadership skills contribute to better patient safety? So just literally a minute or two to just have a bit of a chat with the person next to you on these, and then we'll get some thoughts. Okay, let's get some thoughts from the floor then. Does anybody want to share anything about leadership and what it is about leadership or talk about the patient safety question at the end. What were you talking about there on the floor? Anybody willing to share?
Don't all jump at once. Excellent.
I think if you've got a culture where you've got leaders who are promoting an area where you're working with true respect and you treat everybody the same and everything else, that allows an open culture, which means that people will feel more comfortable about coming forward. So it's kind of no-brainer. We've covered it already.
Yeah, absolutely. So having that culture so that people realise that they can raise the concerns, and it just ensures that the cycle can be complete, because actually, you can have things happening that are maybe not perhaps right, but if there's a leader there that is supportive of people raising that and looking at change, then that can be really positive. Anybody else want to share anything? Anybody have any really inspiring leaders that they've come across in their working career? Let's have a show of hands. Let's not even share. Let's just see. I'll ask that question again. Has anybody had a really inspiring leader in their clinical work? Yeah.
Well, you've worked with them for 2 days.
Yeah, to put your hand up. Well, I'm glad of that. Let's just leave it there then, because we've got lots more to get through. But I think, the point is made there, that the importance of that and tapping into and thinking about, when you're looking at your own leadership qualities, what is it about that inspiring leader? What were they good at? What actually made them, encourage that open culture? And really important, I'll not labour it, but because we are, obviously patient safety is testament to what we do, is that if we don't have strong leadership, then it does have an impact. There's no doubt on patient safety, as we know, and we'll see in some future slides. Does everybody know who this is? Yeah, unfortunately Kate passed away a couple of weeks ago. But she was a doctor herself, for those of you that don't know, and she developed cancer. And she was really astounded at, she was very passionate about the profession that she worked in, and she, proud of being a doctor and of what she could do for patients. And actually when she became a patient herself, she couldn't believe the difference it made about, actually when you're delivering care, you're all absolute experts in your fields, but are you experts in that field of being personable, of having communication skills, of actually ensuring that your patients are able to talk to you as a person and not the doctor or not God? If you live in Orkney, I did a session in Orkney where they just wouldn't even, when I was working with patients, you didn't question the doctor. So Kate was an inspiring leader, and she inspired across the world, not just in England or in the trust that she worked in England or in the UK, that many people have taken on this mantra of hello, my name is. I see it in signatures at the bottom of emails, I see it in nurses and doctors' badges, and it's so important to consider this, because she was an everyday doctor like, many of you sitting out there, who just had a thought, an idea, I need to do something about this. Fantastic use of social media and of, getting Twitter to kind of get this around the world and for it to trend and all of that. But it wasn't an expensive process. Again, going back to how do you demonstrate good leadership? This is an example of somebody who just thought, no, this isn't right, I'm going to talk about it. Behaviour breeds behaviour. It does, however, you will come across people who do not behave, do not have the same values as you within your teams. Really important that you actually spend some time on that, and you don't just expect everybody to follow your way and your rules, your guidelines, your role model. So it's important to really pull out within your team, actually, who have we got here and what do we need to do to actually nurture this team and make it more effective. You can't have a session on leadership and management and talking about raising concerns without mentioning mid-staffs. So important that, we've talked about it, culture will trump rules every time, and that, in that report it said that the Safer NHS will actually happen, will depend on that cultural change rather than any new rules or regulations or processes, protocols that are put in. And again, this is a quote around from the Shipman Inquiry, talking about the importance of, one healthcare professional taking responsibility for raising concerns, that is actually going to have the best contribution to patient safety. So just a couple of pointers on sort of communication and your role in actually as a leader and what you can influence. You know, again, not going to labour it, just really put them up. It's important that any communication that you have within your teams is understandable, relevant, it's timely, that we're not leaving everything to the last minute, that we have actually got, you know, everybody understanding and on the same page. I've worked in many organisations where the communication falling down has had such a bad impact, not just on the processes, but actually the morale of the team. Making sure you and everyone are aware of their responsibilities, again, goes back to that communication. Have you delegated something to somebody? Are they actually able to have that delegated to them? Do they know what they're doing with it? Not make assumptions. You know, obviously you're in a situation just now where lots of new trainees are coming in. You know, not to just assume, oh yeah, that's, of course I haven't covered that with you, or you'll know that because you've worked in this other area, but just making sure that your communication is really key and clear, and that it's encouraging, just as we talked about. And just don't underestimate the kind of level of influence you have if you're a good leader, not just on your teams, but actually on your peers, your seniors, and everybody around you. Just to finish off, I'm just going to touch a bit on reflection. And as I know that people start to have to head off because they've got clinics and things and have to go back to your day job, if you wouldn't mind the evaluations that are on your sheets to fill them in. And the main thing I'm interested in is on the second half of the evaluation forms. It tells you other sessions that the GMC run under this kind of same format. So if there are any particular ones that you think would be interesting, because I'm hoping that Tom will have me back at some point, maybe next year or another time. So it would be helpful to have an indication of what you would like a session on. So if you can, if you're rushing off, if you could fill them in, I'd be really grateful. So reflection, really key within your practice, and it's something I'm sure you'll do every day. Most of us do it without even thinking about it. But the GMC guidance does say a lot about reflection. Within good medical practice, it talks about, you know, taking part in systems of quality assurance and quality improvement, obviously looking at systems and improvements to ensure that we can take steps to address any problems, regularly reflect on the standards of practice and the care that you provide, review any patient feedback if it's available. You know, obviously through your revalidation, you're doing all of this. Within leadership management, we talk about reflecting on your own performance, your professional values, your contribution to the team. So again, going back to that, how do you actually demonstrate that and reflect on the fact you've had a positive impact on your team? And then we also have a continuing professional development guidance. So again, talks about the importance of CPD and about ensuring that you keep up to date with all your appraisals and job planning discussions. So there's loads of definitions about reflection, but they're all really looking at trying to get an understanding of a situation, something that's happened, or something that you've done or you've felt, to really think about how that informs your future action. So it doesn't need to necessarily be a big process. It's about everyday information, everyday things that happen. And there's a couple of tools here, which many of which you'll know, but there's one that I really like, and it's gone down quite well as I've gone around the country, because it's a really quick and helpful tool to help you think about something that's just happened. And again, you know, lots of people write about reflection. You can read about it. There's theories. So, you know, and I'm sure you're all well aware of them. Why do you need to do it? Well, obviously you want to learn from experience. You want to be able to, this is an important one, we do a session on personal beliefs, and you know, especially people who have strong beliefs in certain areas, it's really important that you consider how your personal beliefs then kind of go into the context of your professional work and your professional culture. So really important to do that, and to obviously think about new knowledge, existing knowledge, and how you can link them. There are different types of reflection. You can reflect in action or on action. Again, that's about on the job, considering thinking, doing debriefs, just really trying to have that discussion as and when things are happening. And a lot of people, I'm a kind of after reflector, I'm a reflector on action. I like to go away, consider, analyse, think about actually what happened there or why did I feel like that, rather than being able to do it on the spot. But there are people who do it on the spot, and it's about tapping into that as well and not curbing that if people are coming up with ideas or thoughts. And so it's thinking while doing, or more reflective, analytic kind of reflection. So some of the methods, just to finish off very quickly: Gibbs reflective cycle, I'm sure you're all aware of. Look at what happened, how did it make you feel, what was good and bad about the experience, what sense can you make from that, what else could you have done, and then if it happened again, what would I do? So just a very simple tool to just consider, especially for those that want to do the reflection after. The Driscoll model sometimes gets called the what model. So it's, having an experience, what happened, a description of it, so what, your analysis, and then now what am I going to do? So again, a well-tested model. It's important that we consider within our reflections about, what we do with that. So something happens, we reflect on it. There might be some learning needs identified. We might need to write some objectives to think, how are we going to ensure that that doesn't happen again, and think about ensuring that we get that within our job plans and within our development plans. But this is the one that seems to be quite popular, and we call it the puns and dens. And it's really just patients' unmet needs, doctors' educational needs. And really what it comes down to is, in everyday practice, taking a minute or two after a conversation, a consultation, an operation, whatever it is you're responsible for, and just having that thought as, what couldn't I do for that patient I wanted to do? What did I have to, ask the nurse to go and find out, or speak to so-and-so to tell me, what actually happened there that actually had an impact on the patient? And how does that turn into my kind of educational needs? And an example of that is potentially in general practice, where you've got a patient coming in front of you who maybe needs some support from a community group or a voluntary group, and actually you as the doctor actually don't really know what's available in your area. So thinking about, when they go away, see if you can ask somebody to find out, where are the support groups, where's the information that I can get for this patient, so that the next time somebody comes in who needs that support, you actually have done that, you've got that information at your fingertips. Just a couple of other things on our website. We have lots and lots of resources on leadership management under leadership management pages. We have links to the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management. There are leadership models across the leadership academies. This is our leadership management page, and you can see that it's got information there. Further down, actually, I'm not sure if I've got. Yeah, we also have leadership in practice. We have different links you can go on to, discussion topics. So lots of information there. And just to finish off, I've put this slide up because just to highlight to you that the consultation for the list of medical practitioners is open. So if anybody wants to engage in the consultation, normally when I'm doing these workshops, a longer one, I would do a bit of get your thoughts on it while you're here. But actually in the grand rounds we don't have time to do that. But just to highlight to you that consultation is open. So if anybody wants to give their thoughts into the GMC about what they feel about what the proposals are, then please do so. So I think I've maybe left 1 or 2 minutes for any other questions or any thoughts or reflections on leadership management, if anybody wants to. Or you're all desperate to get back to...
I think it's pretty close to the people needing to get back to their clinics and things. But if anyone has any questions, anyone got any comments or questions? No? Probably be itching to get away.
Yep.
So all that remains then is to thank Nicola for coming from the GMC. Please do fill in the feedback sheets that are on your table. Please press the button on the feedback iPads at the back as you walk out, so I know what you thought of the session today. Grand Rounds reconvenes, I think something around the 15th of September. I'll send you all an email so you know when it is. I have a number of people who've volunteered to give presentations next semester. If you're sat there with a burning topic, please let me know. Also, if you have a wish list of things you'd like to hear, then let me know so I can go and find someone who'll fulfil that wish list. I'd like to thank everybody who presented at Grand Rounds this academic year, everybody who stood in for me when I was away cycling and couldn't chair. I'd like to thank all of you for coming and everyone who's been taking part in Grand Rounds and makes it the success that it is. So thank you very much, and thanks again to Nicola.